Our afternoon tea light with Paper Lantern Writers. I am your host, Edie Cay. Today we have a wonderful person to take tea with. We're going to talk with author Elizabeth Everett. So just to give you a background, if you have not already read her Ladies Formula for Love, she also has a second one coming out in February of 2022, A Perfect Equation, which is continuing in the series. Elizabeth Everett lives in upstate New York with her family, and she likes going for long walks or very short runs to nearby sites that figure prominently in the history of civil rights and women's suffrage. The Secret Scientists of London series is inspired by her admiration for rule breakers and belief in the power of love to change the world. I couldn't agree more. So we are going to welcome Elizabeth. Thank you for showing up today on a Sunday during a holiday weekend on top of it.
Thank you for having me, Edie. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, so we were both at the Historical Novel Society conference in June. So that's kind of where I already knew about your book because I'd seen you on Instagram, and anything that has, I mean, honestly, I'm a sucker for these covers basically every time. So anything that has like this graphic, especially with scientists, I'm in every time. So but it was great to be able to go through the Historical Novel Society shop and, give them a little extra to buy off their link. But yeah, so I wanted to chat with you today because we had some discussions in the Historical Novel Society about the difference between historical fiction and historical romance. So because you write about scientists, let's be scientific and define the terms. So historical fiction, what exactly is historical fiction?
So it's interesting. I would more say what historical romance is, because and already we're into an area where people are going to have disagreements. Some people think that historical romance is a subgenre of romance, and other people would say, depending on how they write, historical romance is a subgenre of historical fiction. So I've always thought of historical romance as a subgenre of romance, but I think there is a trend recent, like I would say past 10, 15 years, I think especially as more and more women authors enter the field, that a lot of what's deemed historical fiction is crossing line over historical romance and vice versa. But I will say that I think to be labeled a romance in any genre, the centerpiece, that the romance is the central focus of the book. So the characters might have journeys, they might have arcs. The story might be very firmly rooted in historical event, but a romance has a relationship between two people. There's a conflict, and the conflict is resolved with a distinct ending where the two people end up together. What do you think?
Yes. So, I mean, the agreed upon construct of romance is that it is, love story is the main plot point, and then happily ever after has to occur. So, or happily ever after for now. They don't have to happen forever, but for now. And then, yeah, I would say historical just means that, prior to 50 years of the date it's written means historical. So that, I mean, that's my concept of it. And I completely agree with you that there are different, more mushy parts. The subtext, I guess, of it is the reader expectation that comes with it. And I think that's where people kind of differ on what is the definition versus what we expect there to be. So I think that's really where the difference lies in definitions. So if that's historical romance, so then we have readers expecting our happily ever after. So they think of an uplifting ending, and you're going to have a love story somewhere in there.
Right.
And so then let's talk about historical fiction then. So what would be our terms for historical fiction?
So historical fiction, I think, yes, it's historical. So it's any time prior to 50 years before the present. And I So here's the interesting thing. Um, as a reader, when I think historical fiction, I'm thinking story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking this is not a retelling. This is not a fabulously written history of a period or of an event. This is a story. And
Mm.
so if there's deviation, if there are fantastic, made up characters, if it's a tad implausible in order to sell this story, then I as a reader am open to it. And again, this is where I really feel like in the past 10 or 15 years, that whole category of historical fiction, it might once have been more narrow, it might have been retellings, but I think now there's different pieces from different genres that are starting to slide into it, and making it more inclusive of other things. And I, as a reader, don't get disappointed. I, as a reader, am thrilled. It may be. I'm thinking, okay, right away. I'm thinking of Courtney Ellis's At Summer's End.
Mm.
She is a Berkeley writer. She just debuted in August, and her book is listed as historical fiction. It has a romance in it.
Mm-hmm.
It has a romance that ends on an uplifting note. It's not a historical romance because really it's focusing on the character's overall journey and growth, but there's a very strong romantic element to it. And it's 1920s. It's post World War I. It's set on a large English estate. But it's very much about the story. It's very much about these characters. It's a very character-driven novel, historical fiction.
Okay.
Um, I can also say that I could pick up, a novel like I'm thinking, oh, what was it? I can't remember her name. She wrote The Five. It was about the five women who were murdered by Jack the Ripper, and she brought a very kind of feminist.
Yeah.
Oh, so, and this is completely different than Courtney's, right? There's the other end of the spectrum. It is somewhat a retelling of historical facts, but she's just giving them their, it's from a feminist viewpoint that hasn't been given to these women, especially around this one historical person that people are so fascinated by, right? I just feel like it's the other end of the spectrum, but it's still historical fiction. And still, as a reader, I pick it up, I'm still going to be satisfied.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, interestingly, then let's talk about your book really quickly, A Lady's Formula for Love. So, would you categorize yours as more historical romance versus historical fiction? You yourself, because obviously it got categorized as historical romance. So, for you,
So
what did you do? What were you thinking of when you were writing it?
So I'm going to say first and foremost, and this is why I think this is such an exciting subject, and I'm so excited to talk about it. And also, like pieces of this, threads of this, were discussed when I did the Historical Novel Society. I did a panel about being a debut author together with Denny Bryce and Sarah Penner, and that was great. But I also hosted a chat room one morning. I
I just,
hosted a
that's very early. It was very early for
very
me. It was like 5 a.m.
Oh, sorry. No. Actually, this one woman showed up from California, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, what are you doing?" She's like, "I'm just going to turn my camera off because I'm eating my cereal." Um, but it was a fascinating discussion, and what everyone kind of agreed to is that as soon as you put the label romance on it, no matter how historically accurate, it people are like, oh, that's another one where there's dukes who bathe and have all their teeth. And I'm dismissing it. It's not, it's a romance and it's not historical.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the biggest, this is something that I see all the time. As soon as something is labeled romance, it's automatically dismissed in terms of whatever the author has brought to it, whether they're, like a terrific, amazing writer, like say Sherry Thomas, or whether they're doing incredible work. The period detail is the lengths to which some of these authors go to in order to make sure every single detail is accurate. As soon as you say it's a romance, it's automatically dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, I'm with you 100%. My book, The Boxer and the Blacksmith, I went to great lengths. I took up boxing, and it's all about women's boxing. And I did my best to be very clear in my author's note at the end, like what is historically accurate, where did my sources come from, what is happening. But everyone sees it as a romance, so they're like, oh, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, and there's not the same level of, because I think that there are definitely historical romances which are 100% romances with historical trappings, right? Mm-hmm. And that's fine for people who want that and need to read that and enjoy that. That's great. For the authors who write it, it's great. They're incredibly entertaining, and some of them are really quite beautiful and very moving.
And I love them. I gotta say, I devour them.
Yes.
Like candy. I'm like, give me all of those things. I want that. And but personally, I love basically everything. I mean, it's not that I'm not good at critiquing good from bad, but it's just that I don't have, defined preferences. Like I love reading science fiction. I love reading fantasy. I love historical fiction. I love all of it. And part of it, I think, is with historical romance, the way it's working right now in the last 10 years, is that they're creating these worlds with heavy verisimilitude. I had that in my head queued up, and then it just didn't come out.
It doesn't trip. That's one of those words. It doesn't trip. It's not a.
But yeah, so it's world building that you get in any fantasy, that you get in any science fiction, and that you are expected to have those in science fiction. And even in historical fiction, you are expected to have that world building, but based on these true facts. And, I see that happening in a lot of romances where they actually have the different series, and then they take from the other series to show that this is the same world. They'll reference, a gaming hell that was in one of their prior series, or, a long lost relative who happens to be the star of this other series. And it's still world building, and it's still just as valid as if you were, writing about any one of the Napoleons. It's still a valid way of constructing a world.
And I would also say, so A Lady's Formula is most definitely a romance. It's a romance. Like, I love these two characters, and I wanted to write about them finding each other, and I wanted to I'm an unabashed romance author. I think that romance is a way to kick the teeth in of the patriarchy. I think that centering love is something that is revolutionary, and it's intimidating for some people, and it's also infuriating for some people because that shakes their worldview. They'd rather center greed. They'd rather center fear. They'd rather center power. In romance centers love. And so that is why I think that some people are incredibly dismissive of it. But at the same time, because I choose to do historical romance, I gave great, I made sure that even though that, would a ladies' social club exist in early Victorian London? I mean, I picked that period for a reason. I picked 1842 for a reason, because of what was happening politically and socially in the country at that time. I could have done 1887 when there were actually women's social clubs, and actually there was one named after a female mathematician, this Maria Somerville at the time. But I took that piece and I put it into 1842. It's not that they're, historically it probably could have existed, but perhaps not to that extent. They really came into being in the late 1800s. But everything else about that, I made certain was correct. I did a lot of research. I had to forgo a lot of things in my plot because things like vulcanized rubber was not invented then, right? Okay, so you can't have this. You can't have this kind of ink. You can't use these kinds of locks. I'll be honest. The other reason 1842 works really well is because of the clothing.
Oh.
If you're going to move clothing, it's a lot easier to do it in 1842 than it is to do it in 1862, right? When you had the hoops and you had the crinolines and the busts.
Yeah. Oh,
it takes 4 hours. Not sexy.
I actually did the same exact thing. So again, Box from the Blacksmith, I took a character, Elizabeth Wilkinson Stokes, who fought between 1722 and 1728. And I put her in 1816 and 1817.
Because of the dresses.
Because
So
it was,
yeah.
and because as a boxer, she was constantly taking her top off. And it was also a great way to showcase underwear as a way that people feel about themselves, because underwear changed during that time period. And because of her age, being in her late to middle 30s is when I place her, she used the old style of underwear because it was easier for boxing as opposed to the new style underwear, which she thought of as frivolous. So, and it was, yeah. So at any rate, so I did the exact same thing for a lot of the same reasons.
Yeah. So I'll be completely honest about that. But I really did so the first book I wrote that got me an agent was a Regency. And it was a very quiet, again, character driven. And we went on sub, and that was what we got back was, it's very quiet, it's very character driven, it's not really what we're looking for right now. And she said, do you want to write about World War II and orphans? Because that's selling really well.
It does sell really well.
And I said, no, it's not my thing. Orphans, well, it's not really my thing. And then she said, well, Victorians are. And so I started to research the Victorian era. And I just decided, okay, I'm going to do it early on. Victoria she's just gotten married. She's someone uncertain. We're coming off the excesses of the Regency. And then, when George was king, we still have some post-war Trump, you know what I mean? It was just like, so yes, this is a light. I mean, I'm going to say, I call Ladies Formula or a Victorian rom-com. There's a lot of comedy in it. It is very lighthearted. There are some serious subjects, but I don't pull them to the forefront. They're just there because they're always there. It is very rooted in history. And I think that there are a lot of writers. I mean, I would also say the Regency is its own genre. I would say, if you're going to talk about historical romance, I would also say maybe distinguish Regency romance, because again, these authors are so incredibly thoughtful about historical details. If you ask some of them about Waterloo, they can tell you battalions, they can tell you which towns the battalions were in, they can tell you about, field marshals, they could tell you about maneuvering. I mean,
they can even tell you about the metallic makeup of the buttons that were on the uniforms.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if you're a member of the Regency fiction writers, but that's the group that was the Beaumont before.
The Beaumont, I'm thinking exactly of the Beaumont.
And they are amazing. They are amazing.
They are amazing.
And they're so intimidating. You take their classes and you're like, oh God.
Yeah. How to do marriage. So, and I think that, I know that they don't get the respect.
Yeah.
That I think they deserve for the amount of work that they do. And not only that, but I really think that there are so many readers who go from historical romance to historical fiction or historical mysteries, then historical fiction, who start there.
Yeah.
And there's a line that I don't see a lot of people draw. And from hanging out in some of these groups and talking to readers and having been a reader, there is a lot of crossover that I don't think authors or publishers necessarily recognize, and it would be great if they did.
I agree. Yeah, I do think that we have a lot of. I think there's a little bit of change that is coming. I don't know if you noticed, but the Historical Novel Society also just opened a romance subchapter, I guess you could say. It's the first time they've ever subdivided, and they just started that. So that's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. I don't think I've gotten my I think I get my newsletter quarterly. Do I get it from them?
And this was just 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. So I haven't heard about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's on their Facebook page that you can, yeah. So I think things are slowly, I think they're going to start changing, because there are books. Also, one of the things that I really enjoyed about your book was that you had someone who was, I don't know if you meant them to just be transgendered or if there was more going on with non-binary or what was happening exactly, because it is just touched on as just this subplot that's happening in the background. But I really enjoyed the fact that you acknowledged that people like that were a strong current throughout time periods, which again is also something that I've been writing about. So that's actually in my third book that I'm writing right now. So again, I just, when I read A Lady's Formula for Love, I was like, oh, I think we have an affinity here. So I really enjoyed it because we are both using a lot of the same themes, just in a different angle. And I really enjoyed that about your work. So I'm very looking forward to your second one coming up here in February.
Thanks. I think, yeah, I mean, here's the other thing. I don't think that, so I'm sure you know, romance in general, has been talking a lot about issues of race, especially, kind of grappling with this. And we had an implosion of our Writers Association, and then a reemergence, and then another implosion. So I think historical romance can be very much of a flashpoint for that. And I don't know that reckoning necessarily has migrated over to historical mysteries or historical fiction in general, but I think it's on its way, and I think it should. And one of the things that I was so grateful for when I wrote this, when I was writing this, was that the entire makeup of historians in general has changed in the past 25, 30 years. So from when I was in college till now. And we are reaping the benefits of that as writers of, truly historical pieces of fiction. Mm-hmm. There are LGBTQ plus members of faculties who are looking at history through that lens and pointing out that they've always been here, and they're giving us the record to back it up. There are, Black scholars, there are brown scholars, there are scholars of color who are looking at their own cultures and then saying, listen, you've been learning history through a white male gaze, set it aside, look at it through our gaze. And then they're giving us the record. Mm-hmm. So that when we write our stories, we're able to be confident in that it is historically accurate. So trans folk haven't always been called trans folk. They've had different names throughout history, but they've always been there. And now when someone turns around and says, well, that's not historically accurate, I can say, it is.
Yeah, I actually always enjoy being like, let me point you to some sources. Would you like to see the evidence? Because I have it.
But I would say, like, 30 years ago, when I was in college and I was doing women's studies, that was like the beginning of it, and it was not necessarily accepted, and there were only like one or two texts that we could refer back to. It was the start of that, and now being, looking back on it and watching it all happen has been terrific. And so, but I will say that that is one of the reasons that I felt comfortable writing Winthrop, is because, I knew that he and men like him have always been there, and and it was important that I have him there, and that I have, Millie and Willie, who are a lesbian couple, and that I had Miss Sweet, who is of African descent via the West Indies, because even though it's set in London in the 1840s, I don't want to not have the people in my life reflected in my writing.
I completely agree. Oh my goodness. Yes. Because the people, it's, it is sometimes, it's almost hurtful when you are writing and you have to basically like eliminate these whole portions of your family, your friends, the people that you love to make it, socially acceptable to historical readers because, the idea of a historical reader is a older white lady. And that's just
Right.
not, I don't think that necessarily reflects really of what historical readers are. I mean, I'm not saying that they're not older white ladies. I'm saying that they are a little more hungry for something different, and that they want to read those. They want to read something that is more inclusive and diverse because it's historically accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I do want to just pop in here. We had a couple comments, but Mary was just saying, Mary Christie was saying that there are always serious subjects in history to include. So yeah, even though you're writing something light, there's always something,
Right.
underlying that you can include in those.
And I think too, anytime you're writing about a strong woman, so that's the other thing about historical fiction versus historical romance that I've heard from some historical fiction readers is that whole issue of, okay, well, I'm reading this historical romance, but women, in the 1800s were actually not strong and independent. They were married and they were very reliant on their husbands, and they this is we're just using history as wallpaper, and you're putting a contemporary romance in historical dress.
Yeah,
And
the feminist agenda, essentially, right. They call it, but they have a term for it. I don't want those romances that are this feminist retelling of it. And you're like,
I have a feminist agenda, and it's right under my house cleaning agenda. Okay. And I'm like, mop the floors, upend the patriarchy, make dinner,
and do some dusting. Always on the bottom of the list.
But the fact of the matter is, if you think, the same way we're thinking about having marginalized folks now back in our books because they're in our lives, they're in our books, they've always been around. Strong women have always been there. Just because, this strong woman is like running a household instead of a small country doesn't mean that she's not there. Our needs and our goals and the way we go about achieving them and our personalities really, if you read especially source material, you realize they haven't really changed that much in even 500 years.
The idea that you can't be married and also continue your own agenda is ridiculous. I mean, especially if you're talking about wealthy women who have the resources to spend money, and yes, it was couched as charities, but I mean, there were women who were traveling the world because they could, because they had, whatever resource they wanted. And just because they're married didn't stop them from anything. And we have this, and I got to say, sorry to bag on the Victorian era here a little bit, but I do feel that the late Victorian morals that shaped our century. And I really do think that, because, going through, like when I went through my mother-in-law's things after she passed away, I found the calling cards that she got when she first got married, in the 1960s.
Wow.
And and the gloves and hat that you would always wear to church or outside at all. And these things, they really were these holdovers, and we still have that internalized. But, pre-Victoria, people were very different. And if you got married and you produced your heir, awesome. Have all the lovers you want. Just, don't be a jerk about it.
Don't be a jerk.
Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah. No, yeah. And I think about one of the scientists who I was researching. I didn't base a book on her, but So that's the thing about writing about women scientists is there's so many rabbit holes. Like you've got to stop yourself. You have to be like, okay, because you have to actually write the book and not research them. But I was thinking about Elizabeth Fulham, who was a chemist who discovered, who basically discovered the process of developing pictures, because she was using different dyes, different metallic dyes on cloth. Like this is how things happen. The fact that, you still have to try and make a living. You still have to try and innovate difficult household chores. You still have to satisfy this intellectual itch or urge you have to investigate things and maybe just tweak it so you can do it within the confines of your social station. Women just did it. And the hard part is that we don't have, we don't have a picture actually of Elizabeth Fulham because she wrote a paper on her discoveries, but she was dismissed. She was literally dismissed because they were looking to other men to actually replicate that, and then they could move on. So women were out there doing that. We just don't have that necessarily the wealth of records that we do for what male scientists did at the time.
Yeah,
So
I completely agree. I mean, it really is what gets written down. I actually have the same problem with my boxer, is that all of her innovations were attributed to another person, a man, and she was largely forgotten about because it was inconvenient, so inconvenient for the Victorians to believe that a woman could have been the best boxer of the, 18th century. So let's just say that the guy she worked near, who also had a very similar background, who was from the same place, who had his own school also, let's just say he did
He's the one, yeah.
So, I mean, I'm in the same exact boat. It's the same story. I mean, I'm doing some other research right now on a Native American storyline that I feel very strongly about, that I've been writing for a very long time. And I'm trying to find a picture of the gardens. And I can't. I mean, these are the things that fed everyone. There are no images that I can find of it, even though you can find like 400 images of this once a year thing that they stopped doing, because it's male centered and gory and flashy. But what about the gardens that they used every single day? Nothing. It's like saying that we don't have grocery stores. It's ridiculous.
Right. In the second book, in A Perfect Equation, I just lost my train of thought. Crap.
Oh, that's okay. Well, I was going to say I got behind on all of our comments here. Janine Engler right here she just says, "Hi, Elizabeth. I can't wait to read your next book."
Oh, Janine Engler, author. She is wonderful. She is doing a workshop. Actually, I just shared this on my Facebook page on how to plot, how to use music and images to plot. She's going to be at the Moonlight and Magnolias, I think that's the name of it, the Georgia Romance Writers Association's conference in October. And she writes Scottish historicals, and one time challenged me to a duel with claymores. Yeah. Hello, Janine.
Yeah. Oh, hello.
Hello. Hello. I don't have a claymore at hand. Sorry.
Claymores, aren't they the heheavy ones though, right?
Yes. Yes, I didn't know that because I don't know anything about Scottish historicals. I was like, fine, let's do it.
It's really heavy.
Yeah. Not really. Who else is there?
And she also mentioned when you were talking about Fulmore?
Elizabeth Fulmore, yeah.
Fulmore. Everybody's named Elizabeth. So if I ever have a problem, and I always just go with Elizabeth because like everyone is named Elizabeth.
Popular name. Yeah. I mean, there is, so the second book, Perfect Equation, is actually so Violet, the heroine of the first book, is a chemist, and she, I took pieces from different chemists' lives. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So before, but I'm going to put a pin in it, to write her. but the book was less about her work and more about her emotional journey. But in Perfect Equation, that's coming out in February, the character is a mathematician, and she was actually based loosely on Sophie Germain, who was a mathematician in the 1700s, a mathematician and physicist, and those two things overlap. And she worked to solve Fermat's last theorem. She solved a part of it, and that happens in the book. Is that I use Sophie Germain's work as my character's book or work, and then so I was able to draw a lot on her because she was quite well known, and she left a lot of letters behind. And that is the other thing that I discovered researching these women, is that obviously the more wealthy you are, the further you could go in your studies. Yeah. Also, the women who really stand out in the history of science are women who had their families supported them. So they came either from an academic background, and so the academics among them understood and recognized their talent and encouraged them, or they were wealthy and they were able to self-fund their work. Mm-hmm. Or it was seen as a sort of an eccentricity, and so it was kind of encouraged, but also like almost like Ada Lovelace. She was Byron's daughter, and did a lot of work in math, and has been there's some dispute around how much she actually contributed to the first computer science, but because she was Byron's daughter, there was like kind of this aura of eccentricity about her and her family. So it was much more acceptable for her to be having this correspondent with male mathematicians than it would have been for someone, say, from a commoner's background. Although even Sophie Germain and Sophie Germain has always been kind of known and celebrated, since not celebrated, but known. Even she in the beginning had to write her letters disguised as a man. Like she wrote, when she began these conversations with these scholars, she signed them as a man. And in Perfect Equation, at one point, the heroine has to disguise herself as a man. And it's not about, and in a lot of, I think in a lot of romances, when the heroine disguises herself as a man, it's like an adventure. It's kind of fun. Mm-hmm. And for the heroine in this book, it's very heavy on her. Mm-hmm. She really resents it. This is something that she resents. She resents that she cannot just take the stage under her own guise, that she has to masquerade. Yeah. But that was the historical reality. So again, when people complain about these, well, all of these characters, they're so, outgoing and powerful, and that wouldn't really happen. Well, you had to be that kind of person in order to make things happen as a woman. You have mm-hmm. You have to stand out. You have to be a little bit different. You have to go out there and smash down walls because nobody's holding open the door for you. Yeah.
Did you read Olivia Waite's A Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics?
No, but it's on my Kindle. I have the biggest, longest TBR on the planet. But I thought of her, actually. I know.
Most of my bookings.
Yes, but I was thinking of that, and I say to myself, I have to pick that one up, because I wondered if she had based any of her characters on actual scientists, or if they were, amalgamations.
I don't remember in her author's note. I don't remember what she did. But it was, I liked it. Okay, good. Yeah. Well done. So, and again, really addresses that idea of that your academic worth is valued based on your gender. So if you wrote your paper as a male, then great. But yeah, as soon as you say you're a woman, then all of a sudden, all of your calculations, all of your observations, everything becomes questionable. So,
And I think so, and I think too, like when we're talking about the line between historical fiction and historical romance, I think too there's definitely been up until again like the past 10 years or so this bias that if a woman is writing historical fiction, it is probably romance. But if a man is writing historical fiction, it's probably a record. Like it's probably,
yeah, more
historical
accurate. Yeah.
and full of facts and, much more accurate. And, and women write about castles and, men write about wars and you can't flip it and you can't, so I think that that whole internalized misogyny is part of the genre, no matter how skilled the author is or how well the book sells.
Oh, I agree. Although I do think that there are more male authors now who are writing in the strong women as opposed to just ignoring them because they don't want to write a woman. And they are starting to actually include these women because it is historically accurate that they are amazing.
There were women back then.
Yeah, they do exist. So
yeah. And there are also, women writing really about men in a really interesting way. I'm thinking of Alison Epstein, who wrote the Hangman's Tale. Have you read that? It's about, Kit Marlowe.
Okay, I'm not really sure. I'm writing it down right now.
Okay, write it down. Yes. Oh my God, it's so good. She's so good. But she chronicles the life of Christopher Marlowe, who was a playwright, right? And he was a mentor to Shakespeare. But some surmise that he was also a spy.
Ah.
And so she fictionalizes his adventures as a spy or misadventures as they were. Incredible. Her research is impeccable.
Say the name one more time, the author's name.
Alison
Epstein. Okay. Okay.
Probably one of the best books I read. I mean, I've got to say, like in the past 2 years, it was just she and I debuted like the same day. We debuted together. It just blew me away. But she took that character. She's writing about this really famous. I mean, Kit Marlowe is such a famous character, and she took him on and never even thought twice about taking on a male character and writing, from his point of view and his quirks and his foibles. And I kind of thought that I wanted to see more of that too, because women don't just have to write about women.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and again, historical romance. You're right. Oh, many authors do a dual POV, so you end up with both a male and a female. And I gotta say, one of my huge proponents is that men should try reading romance because you don't know what you're missing. It is not what you're thinking.
Yeah, one of the things I always think when I'm writing scenes of physical intimacy, it sounds weird at first when I first say it, but I always think about if my son reads it, which he won't, because he asked me specifically for the page numbers because he's like, I don't want to read that, Mom. That's weird. But I rate it as if he is, because my hope is that men will read it and will, and I do them in such a ways that consent features prominently in each of those scenes. And I make sure that I write it so that communication is prevalent and makes it better for the two of them. Like I put things in there that, there are scenes of physical intimacy in historical fiction that doesn't categorize itself as romance. There are scenes of physical intimacy in sci-fi and fantasy that, they don't categorize themselves as romance. And that's what I see missing from them. And that's why I, as a romance writer, get very frustrated because it's
well, and so, I mean, to go on to that, what you were saying though about consent, though, I do think again, in people who might say, oh, well, that's a modern topic. Consent is universal. It is worldwide. There are power dynamics that change with every culture and every time period and all those things. That's absolutely true. However, if you want two people to have a good time and you are interested in that, and it is also the portrayals of popular media that make us believe certain things. So if we had 75 years of popular media showing that, oh, in the 1800s, men just took what they wanted because they could.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then now modern consumers believe that because we watched so many movies that showed us that, even if it may or may not be true.
I will say too, I think I don't have them at hand. Although I thought about they're upstairs in a box in my attic, but I will say that there has been some very interesting scholarship coming out, historical scholarship coming out about Victorian sexual morality specifically, and about the reality versus the stereotypes. And this is not without controversy. I mean, I think there's disagreement amongst scholars about this specific topic. I think I was reading it in relation to birth control because I feature contraception, historically accurate contraception in my first book. And there is a much larger discussion of it in my third book that I'm turning in another 2 weeks, where I did some research, but it's not just, it is. It's very much about who gets to write history, right? Which is what we're talking about this entire time. And in whose interest it is to have history be portrayed in such a way that women are modest. Mm-hmm. Why? Look, here's our historical record showing that modesty was preferred, that women did not use birth control, that they were the keepers of the hearth and they were confined to the domestic arena, and that was their. So, but there's some scholarship coming out, some research coming out saying actually Victorians did use and discuss birth control within the home and with each other, that they were not necessarily sexually repressive, that this is something that was kind of put on them from later scholarship for reasons. Again, I mean, there's a myriad of reasons. And that really came as a surprise to me, because when I was reading, and these are, female historians, women historians that I'm reading, because I would have thought that they would have, been kind of like, look how oppressed we were. And instead they're saying, you know what, this whole idea of Victorian repression actually came from somewhere else, that Victorians were actually, and they were pulling out, as their source mature, they were using informational pamphlets that doctors would give to women about reproductive health, because reproductive health has always been, kind of manipulated. Like, our information about reproductive health has always been manipulated. Well, I would say probably like in the past 50 years has been very much manipulated. But I found that really, really interesting, that, our whole idea about Victorians and sexuality actually comes from someplace else and doesn't come from them. I mean, I think there was definitely some really good PR around Queen Victoria. Mm-hmm. Did contribute to some of that, where she was kind of like a PR, and she was like the beginning of the royal family PR geniuses. She knew how to kind of manipulate the persona that was fed to the public about who she was and how she governed, because she knew as a woman in that position, she was, it was really precarious for her. So she was smart. She was really smart about it. I'm just a grandmother. I really concern myself with my husband and my children. I'm not behind the scenes, pulling any strings when it comes to,
I wouldn't do that.
What? Cookies. Just here sewing.
That's it. Thanks.
all these reports that I read and all this stuff all these decisions I have to make. Oh, I don't know. Somebody else told me.
Well, we have been talking for a while, so we should probably let our viewers go here. But it has been fantastic having this discussion with you. And I got to say, I could talk about this for probably another 2 hours. Not that we've been on for 2 hours, we haven't. But I hope no one feels like it was.
They might feel that way. They're like, oh my God.
Yeah, like, oh, stop. No, this is really fantastic. And Hangman's Tale by Alison Epstein is going to be next on my list here on a very,
very long, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so thank you so much for being here. And in case anybody needed to know, A Lady's Formula for Love is out right now. And then A Perfect Equation, which is the second book, will be out February 15th, 2022. So that will be coming up. And if you happen to be a reviewer, then you might be able to get an advanced reader's copy if you play your cards right.
Great. I take vibes.
There you go. And you have a pretty big Instagram presence, so I assume that at some point you're probably going to be doing a giveaway for an ARC, I would imagine.
Yes.
Was that me just cajoling?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. Like that kind of stuff, honestly, the publisher tells me what I do. They're like,
oh, there you go.
Oh, okay. I'll just tell everybody. But yeah, I would do so here's the thing too. I don't get physical ARCs. I'm getting electronic ARCs because we're saving money. But I'm happy to, once I do that, I'll let everybody know.
Yay. Yeah, fantastic. So then I also, of course, want to tell everybody that you can always follow us, Paper Lantern Writers, on Instagram. And yours on Instagram is Elizabeth Everett Author, I think.
Yep.
And then we are on Twitter at Writers Paper. And of course, you can always join us on our Facebook group, Shine, Paper Lantern Writers. We are always around that way. So thank you very much. And I also need to plug really quickly our next coming events here. Wednesday, September 15th, we are going to be having our Wednesday night Candlewick on Instagram. We're going to be talking adventure books, which is going to be super exciting. So if you need to buckle some swashes, Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Pacific and 10 p.m. Eastern. And then next month, we are going to be chatting with Vanessa Riley, which actually dovetails exactly with what we were talking about today. Just about some diversity and the history that no one wants to talk about. And also historical fiction versus historical romance, since she's a historical romance author who just wrote a historical fiction biography, which is Island Queen. So very excited about those as well. So
Edie, thank you so much for having me. And thank you to the Paper Lantern Writers. I really, really appreciate the chance to talk about stuff like this. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining us. All right. And we are going to be done for today. We'll see you next month. Bye, everybody.